Last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. The International Protest for the Love of Children takes place this past Friday, with family rights fighters coming out in support of parental rights and against the corruption of the family courts and the child protective industry. In Nevada this week, the court is becoming overwhelmed with all the kids they're stealing because the available foster homes are all filled up to the breaking point. In Arizona, the child protective industry tries to cover up its failures in a case where a kid was killed. Arizona lawyers are busy sorting through a mess that was conveniently created by a computer glitch, enabling CPS agents to hide files for years. And parents who have done nothing wrong are speaking out about being placed on Michigan's child abuse registry without a hearing, saying that it causes them to lose their jobs, damages their reputations, and is unconstitutional. In Mississippi, foster parents are bitching about being overridden by social workers when it comes to how to raise the kids. In Illinois, the child protective industry is blaming understaffing for their failure to protect more than 200 kids who were killed over the last 11 years. In Rhode Island, the child protective industry is failing to pay respite care providers who help care for special needs kids. And in Alaska, a new law goes into effect that is said to provide certain legal protections for foster kids. In California, the governor signs a bill to provide a more supportive environment for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered foster kids. The state of Wisconsin is going to be paid $10 million to give some of their foster kids back to their parents. In Maine, the federal government says that the state can't recover the food stamp benefits that were overpaid to about 70,000 people because it was based on a screw-up by the agency. Of course, the LePage administration wants to appeal that decision. And in Michigan, the state decides to take away the welfare benefits from the families of kids who skip school. In Utah, parents are now being forced to surrender their autistic kids to the state because they can't afford mental health care, behavioral therapy, or other services for them. In Maryland, new security measures have been implemented in CPS offices across the state after a mother stabbed her baby during a supervised visit last spring while screaming, "If I can't have her, nobody can." In Ohio, state officials want to study the use of psychiatric drugs that are being prescribed to foster kids and other kids on Medicaid amidst concerns that some might be given multiple medications outside of accepted standards, after it is revealed that nearly 1 in 4 foster kids in Ohio have been prescribed mind-altering drugs. The Columbus School District in Ohio is being accused of using seclusion to punish special needs kids instead of using it only for safety purposes as it is supposed to be. In Tennessee, a school principal is arrested after paddling a 5-year-old so hard that it left bruises all over his buttocks. In Texas, a male vice principal is being questioned after paddling a female student until her ass was fire engine red with burns and blisters. And Delaware banned spanking. The Russian government is seeking an explanation after another Russian orphan who was adopted by American parents is abused in Florida. And the Russian government is also all worked up after CPS agents in Finland wrongfully snatched the kids from a Russian family who was falsely accused of child abuse. In the Philippines, a 13-year-old homeless boy wins a $130,000 Peace Prize for starting a charity that helps other homeless kids. In India, a man's plea for declaring his foster mother dead after she had been missing for 7 years is denied because the court thought his conduct appeared to be suspicious. 2 foster parents from India were arrested after sexually abusing and beating their 5-year-old foster daughter to death, and those same mean old foster parents wouldn't even let her talk to her real parents before she died. In Canada, a CPS agent wants to keep confidential her interview in a public inquiry into the death of a Manitoba foster kid. According to an audit, Manitoba has failed to implement 14 out of 29 recommendations for improvements to their child welfare system over the last few years, and they're simply dragging ass on that anyway. The United Nations is criticizing Canada's child welfare system, saying that kids are falling through the cracks in a system that lacks accountability and a clear strategy. And a former child soldier who was captured in Afghanistan 10 years ago but is also a Canadian citizen is finally freed from Guantanamo Bay to the Canadian government, where he was transferred to a prison there. In Australia, nurses apologized for their roles in the forced adoption scandal, and nearly half of the homeless young people in Victoria, Australia came out of the country's foster care system. In England, the Times reports that hundreds of police files revealed that they knew about organized groups of men running a child trafficking ring for more than 10 years without doing anything about it, and nobody's going to get into trouble for failing to protect those girls. The NSPCC doesn't think that the British child protective industry is acting quickly enough to protect neglected children, even though they snatched 30,000 kids last year, and the fact that they were only able to adopt out 70 kids last year despite pressure to find permanent homes for all the kids they've been stealing, and they're saying that institutional racism is keeping black kids in foster care, and a British social worker is jailed for attacking two people with a machete. In entertainment news this week, a Hollywood director gets so upset about a mother taking her kid to see an R-rated movie that he ratted her out to the child protective industry. The Who's Pete Townsend writes an autobiography, and in it he tries to explain why he used his credit card to access child porn in an effort to expose it. And Kate Gosselin is being accused of child abuse for hitting her kids with a wooden spoon. In Missouri, a sheriff's deputy is charged with sexually abusing a foster child. A worker at a New York group home pleads not guilty to sexually abusing a teen in the home. In Ohio, a father who was incarcerated on a rape charge is suing the child protective industry for failing to protect his kids who were neglected by the mother. And in Massachusetts, a man who raped a 14-year-old girl and got her pregnant is now demanding visitation rights with the child. In Connecticut, a teacher shoots his adopted son when he showed up at the house dressed in black, wearing a ski mask and wielding a knife. In Michigan, an obese foster mother rolls onto a 5-week-old baby and suffocates her to death while they slept in the same bed. In Florida, a man is arrested for filing a false child abuse report against his ex-wife. And in Indiana, the head of the child protective industry resigns after he violated his agency's code of ethics with his involvement in a child neglect case involving his own grandchildren. In Pennsylvania, a foster father is jailed for beating a 3-year-old foster child who frustrated him when she threw up her dinner. Pennsylvania mother who was living at a shelter for abused women assaults a CPS agent who was trying to snatch her baby, then hightails it, only to be caught on Wednesday morning. In New York, a couple who got 90 days in jail for trying to bust their kids out of foster care last year are now suing for custody. And a real mom from New York is accused of making telephone threats against a CPS agent. A Philadelphia woman is challenging the child protective industry after not being allowed to adopt her nieces, claiming that the child protective industry is biased against the poor. In New Jersey, a group of women are accusing a family court judge of being biased against women and want him removed from the bench. And finally, tonight in Arizona, a judge rules that a couple voluntarily allowed CPS agents and cops into their home regardless of threats that were made, like if they didn't, they would take the kids right then and there. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.